Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tarot and Torch. Today I would like to talk a little bit about having a low buy year. This is a very popular topic right now as we enter into the new year, and I've been watching other videos on just everyone's thoughts on this, and this is something that does cycle around every year. At least it has for the past several years, and for good reason, because we should all consider kind of where we are in our finances, in our feelings about where we are with our finances and our belongings and our purchases. So I feel that it's a good thing to talk about, just to be mindful and be a responsible consumer of anything of any kind. So this video is not to create any discomfort around purchasing or collecting or anything of that sort. It's more of the way that I'm approaching it is just more of a mindfulness around where I am with purchasing, and also some helpful tips or ways to perceive a low buy mindset if you would like to, or if you're just curious or have thought about it but are unsure and kind of on the fence. So firstly, this opinion is coming to you from someone that has been collecting cards for many years. My very first deck was purchased a long time ago. This was my actual first deck right here. This is the Dragon Tarot. And you can see that I've kept this box in pretty good condition, but it is extremely old, and I can't say the same for the poor little guidebook that came with it. If you're ever wondering what happens to white books over the years. But this version was copyrighted in 1996, so that's about what we're talking about here. This deck is from the 90s, and it was my very first deck that I purchased through a catalog, because that's how I was able to find it and see it for the first time. When I was purchasing esoteric books, there was some kind of a catalog. I don't even remember the name of it. But this opinion is coming to you from someone who has collected for a very long time. I'm also a Taurus, so I tend to have a strong affiliation with my belongings, because it makes me, to some extent, have a sense of security. And also I personally tend to relate my items to my personal expression. So there's a lot to that. But tarot is also not just a personal belonging for me. It's a spiritual tool, and one that I came to with great reverence, and I still do, when I work with decks. And because I have such a strong affiliation with the physical world and with items and the way that they bridge that gap between the physical and the spiritual, my perspectives may differ from yours, and of course that's totally fine and natural. But all of this to say that I have been collecting for a long time and have amassed quite a collection since this very first deck. But I've been watching everyone's responses to this and their opinions, at least the ones that I've seen so far. And so I'll be referencing some of them as well through the video. But these are a collection of ideas that I have kind of come to terms with, understood, and also am just exploring a bit as well. Some of these are newer concepts about consumerism, collecting, and just our general energy around collecting, and some of the even psychology around that. So I'm going back to my original first deck here because of the video that Moonflower Moments made called The Roots of My Practice, I believe. And I feel that that is a great way to begin and to approach this, is, you know, going back to the authentic self. Why are we doing this in the first place? What led us to it if we started a long time ago? Do we feel the same way about our purchases or our original connection to decks as we did back then? And, you know, for me, looking at this deck, I still feel very strongly connected to it. I may not be learning in the same way as I was back then. You know, this deck led me to learning about the elements, learning about symbolism, and a lot of things, really, especially because I didn't start with a Rider-Waite deck the way that a lot of people do. So I approach my practice in a very different way than perhaps someone that has started that way does. But I used this single deck for many years because, you know, I got this when I was in middle school, and I've been reading tarot since then, and I used this deck quite a lot. I had a journal full of just readings that I would do for myself, and I would record the cards that came up. And I still have that journal somewhere too. I should have gotten that out. But we need to think about, you know, why are we doing this now? And for some people, it is because they want to collect. They want to have a big collection. They want to, you know, have very many different types of decks. And that's where I found myself after I had purchased this single deck and had used it for like 10 years or so. I then started branching out as an adult, as a young adult, using, buying other decks to explore. And through that exploration process, I did learn many things. I did connect spiritually in ways that I didn't before, because it does take you through different lenses of practice and yourself and archetypes and color and pattern, and you can go through journeys through these decks. And that's what it was for me. Each deck was a portal into a different layer of understanding about myself, learning, spiritual connection, deity connection. And I still feel that way. I mean, in many ways, these decks are also paintbrushes in a palette, or you could even say the palette itself. Now, it's to connect spiritually, you only need one deck, of course, but it depends on the work you're doing. If you are only looking for answers, that one deck will serve you well, but there will be a point, at least there was for me, I can't speak for everyone. There may be a point that you reach where you're no longer connecting to your deck. You're not feeling that same spiritual connection. And it could be because you are blocked in some way. It could be that you're over reading. There's a lot of different reasons this could be. But when you pick up a very different deck that you've never seen before, there is, in some degree, in my opinion, an activation that happens where you are being exposed to energies that are different and showing you something different. So that's how we start to go down this path of what kind of activation am I going to get from this next deck? What, is this next deck going to do for my practice? And I love the simplicity of people that only use one deck or maybe just a few. But I have found for myself that, especially because I am a professional tarot reader and this is my job and I do this for a living all day, every day, as well as my own personal readings for myself, I like to have variety, and that variety helps my intuition. And so therefore it depends on what you are using your decks for, firstly. But back to the ideas of consumption. This video can be used for any kind of consumption or overconsumption or thoughts about low buy and needing to be in a less consuming state, because you see it everywhere with makeup, with bags, with clothes, anything. But when it comes to the idea of overconsumption, and we know that we need to pare back, we've reached that limit, we know that we have enough of something, which I do feel that this is a low buy year for me, which I haven't mentioned yet in this video. But yes, this is a low buy year for me, and what I'll be doing is looking at what I already have to fill any kind of needs that I have. And whenever you get to a state where you are feeling the need to fill a gap in your collection of anything, it is because you are looking for that momentary rush. And that momentary rush can come from a place of emptiness or stagnation or a lack of true connection to the things that you are buying. So when we slow down and when we really take a look at what we are doing and how we're feeling about the things that we have, that's when that feeling can sometimes dissipate or go away completely. Because then we are using what we have for our practice in the way that it was intended when we first bought it. And it fills a need when we go back to older decks because it feels sometimes new to us if we haven't used it in a long time, and that original activation may still be there, or just the memories and the nostalgia of that original deck or part of our practice that we've neglected or forgotten. So that's why it can be useful to have multiple decks, because you can go back and forth between them, and it fills that void of needing to purchase and repurchase. And another idea or thought is our relationship with money and physical things. So, and the Ace of Coins is a perfect one to pause on and reflect. But this also comes down to how we feel about our relationship with money in general. So, and I'm not saying that you have to have a bad relationship with money in order to have a no-buy year. In fact, I think it's a great thing to have a low buy or no buy year, to maintain your healthy boundaries and relationships with things. But what it comes down to is, how do you feel about money in your life? How do you feel about things? And do you feel that money is a negative force or a positive force? Do you feel that money is limited? Do you feel that you are in some ways struggling with holding on to money? And these are all things to think about and reflect on. There is no, answer here. This is just a reflection piece, but it comes with the territory of thinking about consumption. Because when we do purchase without much thought, without, really needing something sometimes, and it's just that rush of, look at this new shiny thing, look at this new shiny thing. And we're not appreciating, we're not using the deck, we're not connecting spiritually with it, then what value does it really have in our lives? And is that a trend that we want to continue or not? Was it worth the money that we paid for it? Could that money have been used for something else? So it takes that assessment of our finances, but also how we feel about the purchases, the money itself, and our intention around it. I find that being creative, and that could look, a number of different ways, of course, but choosing instead to immerse yourself in something, especially creativity. So that's creating something, whether that's creating a deck or creating an art piece or creating a song, writing a book. In many ways, even reading can be considered a kind of a creative exercise, since you are visualizing and participating. But being creative in some form allows you to use your time and energy that you would spend shopping or collecting in other ways. And it gives you that same dopamine hit that buying does, at least in my experience. And if you have something that you like to create, if you don't like creating, you could maybe color in a coloring book, or doodle, or collage, or something, a different method that doesn't require pure artistry, if that makes sense. And because I've noticed with myself, I used to create all the time in my childhood, in my 20s. I had books published, I had poetry published, I created pieces of art, I did so many things. And now as an adult, after having kids and working and all of that, I don't do those things. And why? Because I'm spending time doing other things. And I'm not saying that the things that I'm spending my time on are fruitless. However, it does make me think about how I am spending my time. So that's another consideration here, is our time and limitations of that time. I find that creating, and this is just me because I know a lot of people don't feel the same way, but creating tarot, or participating, I should say, in tarot tags and videos about tarot, for me, is helpful because we are using our decks, we're thinking about our decks, we are thinking about how we are using our decks, and that is a thought exercise. It is a way to connect to all of our decks if we want, or just some of them. But it does remind us of how we are using our decks. And I know that there's an argument that some people don't, at least what some people were saying is that some people that are doing these are not then going and using the decks. But at least for me, and I'm sure for many of you, when we make those videos, we do through the month use the decks that we're talking about. And for me, it does help me to kind of go through that thought exercise of what decks are really calling out to me right now that I can move through this month and work with, and it makes me think more about my practice. But if that's not the case with you, then again, it's another moment of reflection and thinking about why is that, and how is that time being spent. And I really don't feel that you need to use every single deck that you own. And this is just another hot take. But personally, I don't feel that you need to use every deck that you own every month, 6 months, year, 2 years. And that's because I have literally grabbed decks that have been sitting on my shelf for 4 years and used them. And I felt the same connection to them that I did when I bought them. And for me, that's what I do. I tend to use things until they fall apart with other areas of life. You can see I use the same altar cloth for months and months at a time. I'm burning through my candle and happy to do it. And then when it's done, I'll consider replacing it. That's just the way that I like to experience life. And I try to take care of my things. That's why this deck, as old as this deck is, you can see I have used and loved it. I'm very careful with it, but it's still usable. It's not, falling to pieces. But I used this deck almost every day for years, and it's still holding up. I mean, it is US games, so I find those decks sometimes do. But with not every deck needs to be used constantly, for me. So, and I bring that up because there is a lot of guilt around using decks or not using them, which I completely understand, because you don't want to spend money on something and then have it just sit there and look at you on the shelf and then there's guilt. But it's like anything else. If you're having guilt, that's just a sign to address it. So if you're having guilt about not using decks, then you can schedule rotation of your decks if you choose to. But also just knowing that eventually you may work your way back around to that deck. It may just call to you one day to use and you'll use it. But if you really know for certain that there's a deck that you have that you'll never use, then maybe it is time to get rid of it. But I know that that's more easily said than done. But that's just how I go about it. Which leads me to the idea of getting rid of decks. Now, I've not gotten rid of a lot of decks. And when I say gotten rid of, I mean given away or thrown away. I understand that that's something that's difficult to do. And I was in the older generation of tarot are spiritual tools, just like, Ouija boards and other things. Like, you don't just throw them away in the trash. I'm not going to say I've never done that, but there was one deck that kind of fell to pieces, literally, that I did throw away. But in any case, what I do, and this is, again, a hot ticket item, but I prefer to sell my decks that I don't use anymore that are used. Why? Because I believe that everything is a transaction of energy, and that energy can be in the form of money. And when you purchase a deck, that is a transaction that you're making. And when you sell a deck, it's the same thing. You're just giving it to somebody else for a discounted rate, which often makes that person happy, especially if you haven't used it very much. And I've had some beautiful sales where people have been very appreciative and thankful for the lower cost of the deck. And it doesn't mean you need to hike the price up very high. It doesn't mean you need to sell it for pennies either. I try to be fair with when I sell decks. But the way I see it, it's just like anything else. You know, if you have something that you're not using anymore, maybe a book or a game, or sometimes people sell their clothes, it's just a way to keep it going. You know, I don't believe that you should have to give it away for free. I know that there's some people that do, but when you sell it, you are not only helping somebody else, but you're helping yourself, because often the times, you know, I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience mostly, but in a low buy situation, in a low buy year, it's because I don't have the funds to buy tons of decks. You know, the economy is not very accommodating right now. I mean, I can't, again, this may be subjective for some, but I'm finding things are a little bit more expensive overall everywhere. And so for me, selling a deck it makes me feel better about freeing up space in my home, giving somebody the option to buy a deck for a discounted rate that they may not get otherwise. And overall, it's a beautiful exchange. I've never regretted it. So if you're thinking about that, or just feeling that overwhelmed about the amount of decks that you have, I would strongly consider keeping that as an option for yourself. Now, if you're adamantly against it for any kind of reason, of course, you know, that's not something that you have to do, but I just feel that, you know, at the end of the day, energy is energy, money is energy. The way that we feel about money translates to other parts of our lives. So there's people that will, you know, that feel that way about tarot reading, energy healing, and all of that as well, which is a whole nother topic. On to the next point. Studying and reading about tarot or any kind of divination, spiritual knowledge is another way to help you if you're feeling compelled to buy a deck. And so what I mean by that is, you see a deck about, I don't know, the Kabbalah. Instead of buying that deck about the Kabbalah, maybe look and see if you can rent a book about the Kabbalah from the library, or if not the library, like a discounted bookstore online or something. There's also free archives of spiritual texts. But in doing so, you are then taking that time to learn something that could be useful to you, or interesting at the very least, and keep you from purchasing something that you may not need. So, and this could be about, you know, anything. I know that there were some great recommendations from other people to read your tarot booklets, and that's wonderful. Of course, the Tarot of Vampires has a beautiful, amazing, meaty book, but there's so many others. The Wildwood Tarot also has a great one. But there's any, deck that you get that you love. If it has a large book to it or a decently sized book, that can be hours of learning, engagement with the deck. That's a great way to go about it. But learning about any kind of system can help you to get out of this need to buy or consume. It's all about, presence, curiosity, and again, it takes us back to spirituality, which is why most people are getting into this anyhow. It's immersion, which you could read about archetypes, myths, anything, the deities. And I consider learning a better use of time than only just purchasing. So now if you're purchasing a deck for studying it and for studying the myths behind it, and you have a book to go with it, and you're really diving into all of that, then that's a great use of time, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm doing that for the Morrigan, the Call of the Morrigan Oracle that I have now. And I have a book, and it's an entire study that I am also using everything that I've purchased, and it's engaging and it's continuous. So another thing that can help you, if let's just say you're struggling because you're struggling with buying things. Something that helped me years ago is the power of wish lists. And that is saving the decks or the books or whatever it is on a wish list. And this could be through, like, Amazon has a great wish list feature, but all kinds of shops do now. Or even just saving in your card or your favorites, whatever it is. But instead of immediately purchasing it and clicking buy, save it to your wish list. And then that lets you reflect for a few days. I let it sit there until I get a gift card for maybe a holiday or some extra cash that I wouldn't normally get. And then when I do get that extra income, then I go back to my wish list and I look through and I get something with it. It takes the rush and immediacy away, and it leaves you feeling satisfied afterwards, because you say to yourself, well, this is something I'm no longer just spending money on carelessly. And in fact, if it's a gift money, then, well, it's not something that you need to buy yourself at all. So just consider doing something like that. You could even use paper and just put it in your planner and have, like this little wish list for yourself for if you do happen to have a few extra dollars here and there. But it makes it a much more rewarding experience than just having a rush, seeing something on, YouTube and then clicking and buying. Which leads me to another point that was made in many of the videos. And these are all great videos. I'm not saying that my viewpoints on any of these things are adding to or better than any of the videos, because the videos that I watched from Moonflower Moments, MA, Peekaboo Rose, and everybody else that contributed were vastly more thought out and organized and better. But I love the point that was made of I believe it was MA that I heard talking about this. But the point that was made about watching YouTube videos kind of can lead you to a place of overconsumption if you're not careful. And yes, that's definitely how I got there. But it's also teaching us something in the process, because we have to stop ourselves and say, what am I doing? And can I find a way to self-regulate and not, overconsume? Can I still find a way to connect with this community, learn about tarot and cards, and, enjoy company of others that do without buying Because if you think about it, I mean, it would be the same as if you were blessed enough to have a real life circle of friends with their own cards. Well, you know, that would happen anyhow. I unfortunately am not blessed with anybody in my life that loves cards. But, you know, I feel that these are triggers that are coming up to help us, that there is something that we can take away from this, that it's good for us, because it translates to everything in your life. You know, if you suddenly become addicted to perfume, I mean, I had that myself. So these are tools that we can use in terms of the low buy years and everybody's thoughts on them to create and craft a better way to purchase and relationship with collecting. And yes, you can still, you know, have a healthy relationship and be a collector. But it does come down to your intentions and what you want from it and what you're really trying to achieve. So I feel that watching the videos, perhaps it's something that you need to limit for yourself for a bit until you get yourself into a place that's more regulated. Or watch videos that are only about other things and not completely about unboxings and that sort of content. And I know it's hard for us content creators to always have videos about other parts of tarot because, I mean, for one thing, I feel that people are looking for videos about the cards themselves, so that makes it very difficult. But also just, it's not easy every week to think of something like that. So, I mean, I do want that to be an intention for my channel, to go back to also some of the witchcraft content that I was making. But I will still make videos about monthly favorites and such because that's relaxing to me. I get to use my decks, and I know a lot of you like to watch those things. But if you don't, that's okay too. You know, you can certainly watch something else, or if you're feeling triggered or compelled by a video to watch something, there's other things to watch, of course. And you shouldn't have to watch something that's making you feel uncomfortable. So really, I just hope that something in here may have helped with, you know, thinking about a low buy year. For me personally, I'm not making any promises. I do have decks coming already that I have purchased, one of them from Kickstarter. So I'm not saying I'm not going to buy anything at all this year. I'm just trying to think more consciously, you know, how it's going to relate into my collection. I know Mary Grace Faerun made an excellent video about this and just how, you know, the decks need to fit into her family, and I totally agree. You know, it's something that it's like adoption sometimes, where you need to think about the personality of the deck. Is it going to get along with me and everyone else in the family? So just thinking about that and really just taking it a little seriously sometimes can avoid a world of disappointment later. But I hope that you enjoyed this. I will continue to look forward to watch everybody else's responses, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.